Now, on the campaign trail, and especially during the primary, Donald Trump loved polls. I mean, you heard him talking about polls all the time. This poll said I'm doing tremendous. I'm actually beating all these other losers. It's great. I'm doing fantastic. Look at the polls. Look at the polls. There's a poll over here that says I'm doing so much better than Chris Christie or whatever. So, look, he loved polls. He loved to cite them all the time, right? Every campaign stop, it seemed like he was talking about the polls. Now that he's president, he seems to not like polls anymore. That's kind of funny.
They're very mean to me.
Yeah, they're very mean to me. Tremendously mean. It's a disaster.
I think in the GOP primary, by the way, just a quick aside, I think in the GOP primary, a stale ham sandwich was doing better than Chris Christie.
Yeah, it's true. And then Chris Christie would eat the stale ham sandwich. Hey, are you gonna eat that?
Handed it to you. That was for you.
Thank you. But now, anyway, today, recently, Donald Trump hating polls. Absolutely. Now, why would he be suddenly hating polls? Well, there's a bunch of new polls that show Donald Trump being the most unpopular incoming president of our lifetime. He hates them, and now he calls them fake news. Now, this is on Twitter because apparently that's how the president of the United States likes to communicate with the rest of the country. Twitter. He says any negative polls are fake news, just like the CNN, ABC, NBC polls this election. Sorry, people want border security and extreme vetting. Extreme vetting. Now, look, maybe that's what some of your voters want. That's not the majority, though. That's not the majority of the American people. Besides, we already have, when it comes to vetting, we do have extreme vetting, don't we, Ron?
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
screening processes are toughest in the world. Look, you have to wait, on average, 18 months at least to, even get into the country. So it is kind of amazing. Now, as far as the polls
amazing
go,
is one way to describe it, yes.
Yeah, well, tremendous is another way. Now,
Tremendous.
as far as the polls he's referencing, you got a new CNN poll that finds that 53% of Americans do oppose his travel ban, and that's what this is about. And 47% of Americans apparently in favor. Now, polls, we know, are representative samples of the American public. So it depends. Sure, you can oversample certain groups, get a skewed result, and that doesn't necessarily make it fake news. Basically, it just takes numbers, and you can have polls that are somewhat misleading if you oversample either side. Now, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of CNN or any of the other networks doing that. So, but anyway, he still believes, no, it's fake news. It's all fake. It's not real. It's crazy.
You know, another piece of irony here is that, like, on the campaign trail, they would, there were a few situations where they would kind of skew polls to make it seem like it was, closer than it was. Like, did you see some of those CNN polls where they didn't factor in anybody under 50?
That's crazy.
Like, there were those polls, like nobody under 50. So they were like, well, it seems like a lot of Americans, and I forget the exact topic, but it was something like alluding to Trump doing better than he actually was at the time.
Well,
but they did so by making sure nobody under 50 was even taken into account, which I think may reflect their viewership too. Because I mean, keep in mind their average age is I think 65 or something like that, or 63. So it's mostly older people watching them anyway. But yeah, there was no one under 50 that took the poll. So it's I mean, to say that polls are totally altruistic and a complete reflection of public opinion, of course that's not the case. That you got to take it with a grain of salt. But to call it fake news is just absolutely ridiculous, and it's very ironic coming from a person who some polls were actually skewed to his favor on the campaign trail.
Well, that's interesting that you bring up the skewing on his favor. I mean, that's sort of what the strategy was back then. Media working with Hillary Clinton. We've got the WikiLeaks to prove that. Where, CNN, MSNBC, all those other, places, those news organizations, were helping to build up Donald Trump because they thought it would be good for Hillary Clinton to go and try to run against him because, she was apparently much, much better than Trump. She had a much better chance of winning. Well, we see how that turned out. So that's interesting that you bring that up, Ron. That's a good point. But as far as these polls are concerned, I don't see any evidence of tampering or oversampling certain groups. So, but anyway, now he said this later on. He said the same people that did the phony election polls and were so wrong are now doing approval rating polls. They are rigged just like before. So again, the polls that were what polls? You mean the polls that were rigged in his favor during the primary?
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. How were they rigged before?
Right.
Like, that'd be a great question to ask. How were they rigged before?
They were rigged.
Because, yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, the media needed a horse race, and they got so. They wanted a Clinton-Trump horse race, and they got it.
Pretty much. And like, again, as you were saying, calling it fake news, it's not fake news. It's not accurate. I mean, fake news, what that is literally making things up out of whole cloth. Okay? There's a reason that they called it fake news. And look, there's plenty of that going around. It's going around on the left, it's going on the right. And let's be honest, like the fake news that we see on the left, a lot of liberals are actually pretty good at deciding and figuring out what is fake news and what isn't. On the right, it's a lot more of a problem because they're like, oh, this fits my narrative, so I'm going to go with it. Yeah, okay, man. And you wonder why we say that you're living in a completely alternative universe with alternative facts. But see, here's the other thing about Trump. See, it kind of goes to who he is. We know that Donald Trump pretty much only cares about what, cable news says about him or, his rallies and stuff. I mean, because he's always watching the news. He measures himself by his popularity and his poll numbers. And also by how many positive versus negative segments he has about him on the news or, again, his crowd sizes, right? So when he sees a polls that he does not like, I think that's considered a personal attack against him. We can't have that. And since he believes he's a winner, by definition, it has to be fake news. Anything that counters that narrative. I mean, it has to be fake. Has to be fake, right, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, not everybody can have the journalistic integrity of Steve Bannon and Alex Jones. So there's a lot of fake news out there, and Donald Trump, he knows more about journalistic integrity than anybody. He knows more than the generals and everybody else. So
more than
he's gonna hold the fake news accountable.
Yeah, and look, sometimes it can be pretty hard to figure out what's fake news and what isn't. That's why you actually have to look into things. And there's, you've got to vet your sources. You got to take a look at things. Sometimes, like, you run across the story and you're like, "Oh my God, this is crazy. Let's take a look at this." No, well, look, it's fake. There's actually nothing useful behind that headline. And
yeah,
look, news organizations get taken in by fake news. That happens, and that's why fake news. You really got to watch out. You got to check your sources, and even if you do, sometimes you still get taken in, and that's what's nefarious about it.
Well, here's the thing, though. I know we've kind of talked about this point on the show before, but I think it's really important to not forget about. Yeah, it's ridiculous that this administration is literally making stuff up, and now they're hiding under this fake news narrative whenever they get asked a question they don't want to answer. That's absolutely ridiculous. We've never seen anything to this extent in power, at least not in my lifetime. But let's not forget that part of the reason we have this fake news epidemic, that it's this talking point now, is because of the corporate media's ridiculous failure, because of how neutral they've been for years. When it comes to something like climate change, and you're supposed to be a news outlet informing people, and you give equal lip service to peer-reviewed science, and then somebody that thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old, probably because they were dropped on their head one too many times as an infant, and you give those two narratives equal lip service as if they're on the same playing field, you're completely neutral, you're not doing your job, and that's where alternative facts come from. When you don't take any objective stance on anything, and you misreport anything that would conflict with your advertiser's agenda, that's where fake alternative facts and fake news comes from. So a big reason we have this now, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it, Donald Trump is the Frankenstein of our system. That's exactly what he is. So to just blame him is very short-sighted. He's the Frankenstein of our system. We have no common narrative, no common center now because of the media failing for years and years.
Yeah, and since the media did all that stuff, I mean, we've got no trust in it. There's no trust in corporate media anymore because they stayed neutral, because they really prioritized access over giving actual facts. So you're right about that. And we as a society are pretty much suffering from that now because, I mean, look what happened. Nobody believes anything on the news when there is actually, and you know, yes, Washington Post is fucked up. New York Times is fucked up. I mean, there's been a lot of fuck-ups in news. But there are still also good stories and factual stories and good investigations and actual facts in these from these news sites. So you have to really go and try to separate fact from opinion.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I wasn't trying to make a blanket statement that it was like a complete abject failure all around. I mean, there's good content and good analysis that comes out from all types of sources every day. But as a whole, this is a result of a very significant structural failure that needs to change.
Yeah. But to go back to the original point, though, or the original point of the article is basically talking about how Trump considers anything that's against his narrative fake news. Now, you've got his friends, right? And it goes back to who he is. One of his friends, Newsmax CEO Chris Ruddy, said, quote, "I think in his mind, the success of this is going to be the poll numbers, right? If they continue to be weak or go lower, then somebody's going to have to bear some responsibility for that." And again, this shows, again, how he's watching the poll numbers, and it really, I mean, it's obviously it pisses him off, and he's like, well, I can't have this. Somebody's going to suffer for this because it's not my fault. It's not my policies. It's got to be somebody else's fault. Now, the New York Times also writes that thanks to the enormous number of leaks from Trump's staff, he said that Trump has little access to his fans and supporters, an important source of feedback and validation, and feels increasingly pinched by the pressure of the job and the constant presence of protests. For a sense of what is happening outside, he watches cable news, both at night and during the day, too much in the eyes of some aides, often offering a bitter play-by-play of critics like CNN's Don Lemon. Which is funny because we make fun of Don Lemon. So it's interesting that Don Lemon got it wrong again. Wrong. You're wrong. Come on, man. But he also said that this is in response to an article that shows his incompetence and that of his team. He tweets out, "I call my own shots, largely based on an accumulation of data, and everyone knows it. Some fake news, all caps media, in order to marginalize lies." That kind of rhymes a little bit. So, but again, this isn't true. This guy regularly skips briefings, doesn't really read all that much, and he just watches a lot of TV, and that's it. And this is not fake news. This is according to aides leaking to the press. These are his people that are talking about the incompetence in this administration. But again, anything comes out, nope, fake news, fake news.
Well, and I mean, I wonder from a time management standpoint, what the hell this guy's doing. You know, I mean, I would not have that amount of time in a given day to watch cable news. And I can say this with 100% confidence. There's a hell of a lot less pressure on my gig than President of the United States. A hell of a lot less. And I wouldn't have that kind of time to watch cable news that much. I don't know many people that do, no matter what they do. Meanwhile, this guy, between tweeting and cable news, it's like, oh, when is he being president? And he's saying he's running his businesses too. Yep. It's I mean this is a circus.
It absolutely is a circus. And look, the same New York Times article that I got that quote from is talking about how, you know, again, he spends most of his day watching television in his bathrobe.
Yeah, how are we not incredibly disturbed by this?
He walks around the White House and gets lost. There are aides in that same article that can't find the light switches in different parts of the White House. Who can't find the light switches? Seriously.
I mean,
insanity.
he has like the lifestyle habits, and I'm not trying to like poke fun at this because these are sick people. I'm just being honest here. Like he has the lifestyle habits of like someone that has a cocaine issue. Like just the way he'll like just randomly go off on something. Like he'll just like be sitting around and be like, Chicago, we gotta do something about it. They're bothering me,
No,
or
no, no,
like
no, no.
whatever it may be, and then he just tweets. It's like almost like some kind of addiction type mentality where they just like wander from topic to topic and then all of a sudden they're focused and then they're just gone again. Like this is not a mentally stable human being.
Well, Ron, you said he doesn't just randomly sit there and think about Chicago. That was actually about 45 minutes after Bill O'Reilly said something about Chicago. So again, he's watching cable news and he's getting his cues from Fox or
Yeah, so he
CNN or
gets his
something.
cues from somewhere, but nonetheless, it's like, but then he's fixated on it, and it's
For a
like you
short amount
have
of
other
time.
stuff to do, is what I'm saying.
He tweets. Well, he sees the segment and then he's like, "Oh, I got to tweet about this. I got to take to the tweeter," and that's what he does. And he goes and he tweets something out, and then like 5 minutes later, he forgets about it.
Right? Yeah, I guess I don't know.
That's the way that this guy works. And look,
And you don't find it disturbing? I mean that's bizarre.
No, it is disturbing.
That's bizarre for anybody having a job, especially if their job is president of the United States.
Well, this is the only job that he's ever really had, too. So let's be
good
fair
point.
about that. But I have a more disturbing part from this New York Times article, and this should be absolutely frightening. And this is, I mean, it's right in the middle of a section talking about the power struggles within the White House. It says, Mr. Priebus bristles at the perception that he occupies a diminished perch in the West Wing pecking order compared with previous chiefs. But for the moment, Mr. Bannon, Steve Bannon, remains the president's dominant advisor, despite Mr. Trump's anger that he was not fully briefed on details of the executive order he signed, giving his chief strategist a seat on the National Security Council. That right there, nestled in that thing, in that paragraph, should be the most scariest thing ever. He signed something without reading it, without understanding what was in there. Oh, you mean I gave this job to Steve Bannon? All this power? I didn't know that. Dude, you're the president. You signed it. How do you not know what you're signing? I mean, it's one thing to like, you know, those service agreements or something for iTunes when you want to download it or something, and you're just like scroll, click. Sure, I agree. This is what Donald Trump is treating executive orders like.
Mm-hmm.
This is scary.
Well, I don't know, man. I'm going to be a little bit contrary here. I actually think that's the most politician-esque thing he has done so far. Not actually reading the bill. Why do we have the Patriot Act? Because nobody read the fucking thing, except for Dennis Kucinich. So now, if people are paying attention to this, that, yeah, he's not actually reading this stuff because he's such a dope and it's obvious and he's not even covering it up. Well, a lot of politicians have been doing this for years.
But a lot
That's
of
part of
these
the reason why we have the
politicians-
ridiculous policies we have. So let's not tolerate it anymore.
I agree with your sentiment, but a lot of these politicians, they sign it because their donors say, and you know the people that pay them, hey, sign this.
But they don't
okay.
sign it because
can
they
do that.
read it. They don't read it.
They don't read it. Their staffers read it, of course. But
Presumably.
this is Steve Bannon essentially saying, no, here, hey, Donald, sign this. And then later when somebody says, you signed something that put him into a more powerful position. What?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. Oh, you sure? Yeah, we're sure. You signed it. That's your signature.
So basically,
this is
he's just a
more
puppet
scary
being
than
pulled
standard
on
politician,
strings.
I think. It's a little worse than standard politician stuff, I think.
Maybe worse because it's in the spotlight. I don't know. I mean, you're basically saying he's a puppet on a string. Well, so was
Yeah.
George Bush for 8 years.
True.
So was George.
But-
I mean, that guy. If Dick Cheney put anything in front of him and said sign it, he would have done it. Obama actually, had some backbone and had some moral guidelines. He was certainly very imperfect. We've talked about a lot of that too. But
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think this kind of goes into the theme where it's like people are really paying attention now because you kind of have the you kind of have just the epitome of everything that's wrong with the system that we have.
Yeah.
Because that's what Donald Trump is. That's what he'll go down in history as.
Well,
And
that's
it's
for
been
sure.
a week or so. Well, longer than a week now, but yeah.
Well, I know our president is, look, he's going to go down, I think, as somebody who's a vain narcissist that watches cable TV and lives in a bubble where he thinks he's smart and that everything that's negative about him is just nothing more than fake news. Probably worst president ever. We're screwed, man. God help us all. If you believe in that.
Can't help you there.
If you believe in that. All right. I actually forgot the pictures to this. The images, so maybe we could skip the saddest Trump rally ever and move on to Bernie Sanders.
Wherever you want to go, man.
Yeah. So I know I forgot to get the pictures together of the sad Trump rally. And it just doesn't do it justice if I don't have the pictures for you guys. So let's go to Bernie Sanders.
I mean, isn't every Trump rally sad?
Yes, but this is sadder than most.
Is there ever a happy Trump rally where you're like, oh, these people, they just like that he speaks his mind?
Right. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.